Welcome to Unspoken Conversations with Candace, where we talk openly about taboo topics in order to spark difficult and uncomfortable conversations, where we allow a safe place for anyone who has had trauma to be heard. Unspoken Conversations with Candace is about speaking your truth by using your voice because you matter. Each season on my podcast has its purpose, and for season 3, it is dedicated to all male survivors. I want to express my sincerest gratitude and acknowledge Jeff Chugum. He was curious to learn more about my podcast. Once I explained my vision for season 3, he wanted to help. Thank you, Jeff, for your sponsorship and support. Special thanks to Jesse Daso for assisting in the planning, logistics, and helping to invite guests for season 3. And last but not least, Neil Perek, my season 3 co host. Neil arranged to have Digimentors produce the show on a pro bono basis. Digimentors is helping me step out of my comfort zone by implementing video production. This form of media stream will be available broadly via our social media and our websites. I am extremely grateful to work with Neil and Digimentors. If you are interested in a high quality virtual or hybrid event, I encourage you to reach out to Digimentors. They work with nonprofits, higher education, corporate partners, international organizations, and others. It does not matter where you are based or how big or small your business is. They also do social and digital consulting, training, workshops, videography, recruitment, and more. Check out the links in the show notes for their contact information. Trigger warning. Before we begin, I want to make you aware that we are going to be talking about some very sensitive issues. All of our guests are male survivors of sexual assault. They will be sharing very personal stories about rape, incest, sexual abuse, and or assault. Please take a moment and make sure you are in an appropriate place to watch and or listen. Some of the descriptions may be explicit and have the potential of bringing up a range of emotions. It is more than okay for you to hit pause and come back to this later if you find that you need to. Nathan Spiteri is here today. He is a filmmaker, an actor, a writer. He is also a sexual abuse survivor, activist, and advocate. He was born in Australia. Nathan was sexually abused as a child, threatened with his life and that of his family. He turned to drugs, violence, and sex as a result to survive. Hitting rock bottom, Nathan finally came out on the other side. Through intense therapy, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics, and Sex Anonymous, he has chosen to use his painful past to help others, aligning himself with organizations both in Australia and the US to raise awareness, educate people, and act as an advocate for sexual abuse. And I am so honored to have Nathan Spiteri on my podcast today. So Nathan, let me welcome Nathan to the show here.
Hello, thank you.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm looking forward to getting into it and talking about my life and past and what we're doing to try and help those other victims and survivors who don't have a voice. And a lot of work to do.
Yes. And Nathan, when we first met, I remember, you were just so raw, and you were as raw in person as you were in your book. And I remember telling you I was reading your book and I was just like in shock, because it's like I wrote my book, but then when I read your book, it was like a different shock value for me. And sharing that with my daughters and then having them kind of shine a light on how different they're going to parent because of some of the things that I shared that you went through. And then, I could have read your bio on and on, all of the things that you're doing. Just a true ambassador of change with all the organizations that you've plugged into, with the No More campaign, Men's Link. I was just the Children's Liberation Foundation. I was just so impressed by all of the efforts, which I know as survivors, it's like, what else can we do? It's what we can't do, right? We're just like taking over the world. And I am just so grateful again for you to be here to talk about your memoir and to share your story with our with Unspoken Conversations and all the listeners,
Great,
all the viewers.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited to share, my story about what I went through and just about my memoir and what I have going on. And it's about having a conversation. It's about creating change, because if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it. And it has been a struggle. It has been tough, and a lot of rejections when I want to try and talk about this stuff and get it come out and speak to the media about this. It's been a lot of rejections because I am a male. So, we need to change the narrative on male and child sexual abuse. And the only way to do it is to start the conversation, is to get more people involved, and to, so that we're not alone, that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of us out here who have been through child abuse, and we aren't going to go away. We are here, and it's time to really make a difference and say, listen, this is what real life is like. We're not going to sugarcoat it anymore. We're not going to pretend it doesn't happen, sweep it under the carpet. So, yeah, again, thank you for having me on here and having this platform so that we can talk about these stories.
Yeah, I remember.
Nathan,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Candace. I was going to say, Nathan, if I may, just from our brief conversation, I just want to tell you how inspiring you are to me personally, as another survivor and someone who is so actively and eloquently sharing their story.
Thank you.
It gives me strength.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really do appreciate that.
And I think, when I created the podcast, I mean, I knew I had intention. It was purpose, it was passion, it was intention. And then the call of action last April, during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, that's how Neil and I got partnered up, is he had a call of action for the females, for the women, on a panel discussion to say, what are we doing as women to help band together with the men to kind of change that, right? Because you go into a resource center and usually pictures and photos are geared towards women. So sometimes men don't feel that safe place. And then Nathan, when I spoke to you and you mentioned to me, 95% of the media, they don't want to speak to the male survivors. They don't want to shine a light on male survivors. And I know, you being in your film industry and you kind of creating your own series to say, well, if no one's going to do it, I'm going to take the charge to do it. Yeah. I thought that was amazing. And that really hit me to the core. And the reason why I'm doing this is so that I can help all survivors, men and women.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was talking to my coach about this. I did a TED talk last year in October of last year. And my coach who I was working with on it, he said, Nathan, you're the pioneer of this. You're one of the very first to be out there and so raw and real and public about your story and putting it out there. Because I guess when most men come out about their story, they'll say, I was abused, but here I am today. They don't talk about the mess in the middle, and that's what we need to talk about. We need to talk about the mess in the middle, where we were to where we are today, and what we had to go through to get to where we are today. And, as you touched on, 95% of the media has said to me, if you're a woman, we talk to you today. Because you're a man, we are not going to talk to you. So, it has been very difficult. It has been a lot of rejections and has been a lot of no's. But, if it's funny because I've questioned myself every day. I just want to give up. Why am I doing this? It's a waste of time, this, that, and the other. But I think this is what I was born to do. This is something I never wanted to do up until a few years ago. I didn't really talk about my story until 2018 when a huge article came out about me in Australia. And then I thought, all right, well, I'm in. This is what I'm supposed to do. What happened to me happened for a reason. The reason why it happened to me is to tell my stories, to educate the world, is to save lives. And, I'm in it now. And like you said, a movie script's been written about my life, that the memoir has come out, and there's a possibility of turning that movie script into a 6 to 8 part TV series. So, there's lots of things going on, and I'm just excited for what's to come. And I think, in doing that TED talk last year, the door is finally opening for people like you and myself and all other victims to be able to walk through that door and say, listen, it happened to me as well. It's not just me. And to share their story and to find peace, to get closure, to be able to move forward with their life. That's the most important thing. Because I think a lot of us, especially men, are just stuck We have no resources. We have no one to talk to. Toxic masculinity, shame. I think 79% of global suicides are male, and over 70% of those suicides are men who have unresolved trauma, have never spoken about their trauma. So it's time we change that. It's time we really make a difference.
Yeah, I totally 100% agree. And, talking about, you talk about the mess, you talk about as a survivor, and I say we're thriving. I mean, you go from being a victim to a survivor to the thriving mentality, which I think all three of us are a testimony of that. No matter what our past was, it doesn't define who you're meant to be.
Yep.
And you are a true living testimony of that. And I think, talking a little bit about that mess and sharing, just painting the picture a little bit. And then I want to know how you took that mess. And I know Neil probably wants to know is, how did you then take all of that into a TED Talk? Because aren't those really limited with like a set amount of time? So to tell that story, I want to hear about, a little bit about the mess, if you want to describe that, and then sharing that TED Talk component. Yeah. How do you condense all of that into a TED Talk? It's amazing.
So what I did, we were initially told we had 12 minutes. But as time went on, we had about 4 months to prepare our TED Talk, to get it ready, to memorize it, to do what we had to do to finally do it on stage. We were told 12 minutes, but we had until 18 minutes was the total amount of time you're allowed for a TED Talk. So they told us 12 minutes just to keep it safe. And then, if you went 2-3 minutes over, it did. Mine went about 15 minutes. So for the first few minutes, I just spoke about my story, where I was 8 years old, growing up in Australia, being abused, having this man say to me, the first words he said to me was that if I tell anyone, he'll kill me and kill my family. But then what I really spoke about, because my story isn't about that. It's not about the abuse and this man and what he did to me. It's about how I overcome it. And that's what I talk a lot about in those, 15 minutes. I spoke about how I broke up with my abuser. That was the main theme of the story. And I went over 7 points, seven of the main points. I had many, many more, but the main points were how I got over anger and hatred, sabotage and imposter syndrome. And then there was shame and ego. Then there was, talking about education. There was about addiction and self-harm. So, I spoke on all those points and how I got over each one of them, how I got through them. And it was about forgiveness. It was about finding love. It was about, for education, the most important thing for us as adults is to educate our children. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to educate our kids, we first need to educate ourselves as adults, as leaders, as a community of thinkers and doers. Otherwise, what's the point? Why are we here if we're not going to educate ourselves so that we can educate our children? And I've spoken about this at other talks. And the surprising thing is I've had so many parents come up to me and say, I can't speak to my kid about that. I'm not going to speak to my children about that. But I'm like, these are your children. Why would you not want to speak to your children about abuse? Telling them that they're going to be okay. Telling them that it's not their fault. Telling them that they can talk about it. Telling them that it's called a penis and a vagina, and that's what it's called. We don't give it nicknames. It belongs to them. No one can touch it. No one can play with them. All of those things we need to educate our children on. So that was a big thing about, education. Another big thing about addiction and self-harm was community and therapy and rehabilitation programs, mindfulness techniques, connection to community, connection to others, connecting to people who love us, who trust us, who believe us, who were going to listen to us. That was a big thing. Imposter syndrome, self-sabotage, talking about how, one of the main things I learned in therapy was being able to go back. Well, my therapist asked me, if you could go back and speak to your childhood self, what would you tell them? And the most important thing was that it wasn't your fault. Mm-hmm. If we could all go back and speak to our childhood selves and tell them that it wasn't our fault, we will then soon be able to get over imposter syndrome and self-sabotage. Because I grew up, I didn't tell a soul for 25 years. So for 25 years, it was all my fault. I don't deserve love. I didn't deserve peace. I didn't deserve joy. So once I understood that it wasn't my fault, a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. I was finally able to accept everything I'd been through in my life And I was able to realize that, you know what? There is no shame. There is no self-sabotage. There is no imposter syndrome. And shame is put onto us by the people who are putting it onto us. They're projecting their own shame onto us. That's where shame comes from. Talking about anger and hatred. In order to move forward with anger and hatred, you need to find forgiveness. I had to forgive myself for what I'd been through and for what I'd done. And I had to go to a certain place to be able to, to a certain extent to forgive this man. Because if I didn't forgive this man for what he did to me, then the anger and the hatred would still be inside of me. I would hate everyone. I fuck this and fuck that and blah, blah, blah. And I can't do it. So once I was finally able to find forgiveness for myself, I was finally able to move forward and realize that it wasn't my fault, that I'm not, I don't deserve imposter syndrome and self-sabotage, that we all deserve peace and love and joy. And they're the three main things I talk about, is just to find peace, love, and joy in my life, because it's something that I've never had, something that I've never experienced. So now to be finally in the place where I can move forward and find those three things, then that's what it's about. So that's what the talk was mostly about. It was about the stuff in the middle, the stuff in between, from where I was as a child, as an 8-year-old kid, to where I am today. Let's talk about the mess in between and how I was able to overcome that, how I was able to, break up with my abuser and to be able to finally move forward and live the way I finally want to live.
That's a very powerful statement about breaking up. I felt that same thing. I could completely relate. Neil, I don't know about you. Do you feel anything with that statement?
Well, I mean, I wish I could say I can relate, Nathan. I'm not there yet. I was abused by a neighbor when I was 7. Shared it, on earlier episodes, the full story. But this neighbor came over, told me he wanted to do a Cub Scout project. I didn't know what he was doing, and he proceeded to abuse me. And it wasn't until my parents came home and asked why I had left the light on in a downstairs room. And I told them, oh, well, my neighbor came over. He did this, this, and this. Everything exploded after that. I was 7 at the time, and you said you were 8.
I was 8, and mine went from 8 till 12.
Yeah.
And then I say he abandoned me because he just disappeared out of my life.
Can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, that stuff in the middle is really messy. I mean, I have my own messy middle, if that's what we want to call it, and I still haven't come to terms with it. I don't know where to put it in terms of my thinking about experiences I had. But can you take us back to when you were 8? Let's go back to the beginning. What actually happened to you, Nathan?
So obviously I grew up in Australia. I'm from Australia, but I live in New York now. I was 8 years old and I went to the local swimming pool with my sister. It was a hot summer's day. It was, summertime. I think it was just after Christmas. Went to the local swimming pool. My sister left early with her friends and I stayed there, and, we rode our bikes down to the pool. And, this is something that we've done hundreds of times before. We're talking about the mid-'80s when our parents would send us out as kids and say, don't come home until it's dark, or don't come home until 6 p.m. tonight, or whatever it was. My sister left. I stayed there literally to the very end, went into the change rooms, and a man followed me in there and he raped me in the shower. First thing, and I grew up in a small town. First thing he said to me was that if I tell anyone, he'll kill me, kill my family. And he knew where to find me. So this relationship went on for 5 years. And, growing up in a small town, we would have to catch the school bus down to a local bus interchange. From there, we would catch the bus to school, and exactly the same in the afternoon. So he knew what time the buses would get down there in the afternoon. We would all stand around as kids at this bus interchange. And I spoke to my friends about this. And, he would just walk up to me at the interchange, put his arm around me and walk off with me. And my friends just thought he was a family member or my dad or someone just taking me home. So it started out very, from there it was all loving, but then, as soon as he got me into his house, he would, shove me against the wall, beat me up, slap me across the head, if I wasn't acting the way he wanted me to act. Through his grooming, his manipulation, through his lies, telling me that this is what I wanted, telling me that I picked him up at the pool, telling me that my parents hate me, my parents want me to be with him, that he loves me, that I love him, that, my parents and my brother and sister don't love me. So, through all that grooming and manipulation and the lies and the constant, as an 8-year-old, you believe it. And we formed a Stockholm syndrome type relationship where I thought I felt love for this man. I thought I wanted to be with him. And it got to the point where, 8 years old through to 12 years old, I would ride my bike to his house, wait outside for him to show up after work or to, just to see me, to get called in. So I was going there knowing all too well the horrible fate that awaited me. This went on for 5 years. He abandoned me. For 2 years, I was so lost and I questioned who I was, what I was, where I belonged in the world. Am I gay? Am I straight? He told me how special I was. Was I really special? Does this happen to every boy? And then from 15 years old, my depression had hit. I was stealing my dad's drinks and his cigarettes when my dad used to smoke. I would drink his beer and his scotch and, just get drunk. And I use that as a form of masking and just being able to get away and lose myself. 15 years old, I would ride my bike to this industrial part of town. There are a lot of gay clubs in there, cruise lounges. I would go into these sex clubs and cruise lounges and let these men abuse me again, let these men rape me. And then I would turn around and beat them up, bash them, rob them. And that was my way of getting my power back, my way of feeling alive. That was my fuck you to the world. So that went on for quite a few years, discovered drugs, discovered heavier alcohol, got addicted to it. I got invited to come to America. I was acting and doing some modeling in Australia, but I got invited to come to America to do some acting here in my late 20s. Came here hoping to get away from that life in Australia, hoping to get away from the drugs and the alcohol and the sex. And, it's New York. You can get everything when you want, so cheap. Fell back into that lifestyle, started shooting heroin, smoking crack. Lots of violence, lots of sex to the point where I almost killed myself, almost killed someone else. Finally told my best friend. She was done with me. She was ready to just throw me to the curb because I was an absolute mess. Finally told her. Through that, she helped me get therapy. Throughout therapy, I started group therapy, then AA, Narcotics, Sex Anonymous. And, it's been 12 years now of just therapy and finding myself and understanding who I am and what I am and where I belong in the world, and my relationship with this man, with my family, with friends and lovers. I'm now finally ready to have a relationship with a female and be in that and give my all. I'm ready for love. I'm ready for peace. I'm ready for that connection, communication. I've learned about toxic masculinity and masculinity, and how, the more vulnerable, the more open, the more communicative you are, the more you cry, the more you are a man. Whereas if you hold it all inside, that's where the trouble begins. So, it's definitely been a journey, and, I've wanted to kill myself plenty of times and tried. I've suffered bouts of depression in my life. I've someone who I kind of started seeing just said to me, Nathan, you went down to the very depths, but you were able to pull yourself back out. And I guess that's kind of what I did. I went deep and I fell deep and I was in it. And I wanted to be in it because that's where I thought I belonged. But I finally understood myself. I finally was able to learn about my relationship with this man. I was finally able to accept my relationship with this man and and move forward with it. People always say, get over it, move forward. It was 20 years ago. What are you doing? But what people need to understand, it's not about getting over it, because what happened to me, what happened to you, it's a part of our DNA. It's a part of who we are. We are never going to escape from it. It's a part of me. It's about now it's about moving forward with it, evolving with it, learning to understand what it was, and growing with it. It's not about throwing it away, because as soon as we throw it away, it's going to come back and hit us in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, a month's time, a year's time. It's going to be twice as heavy and twice as hard, and it's going to kick our ass twice as much. So it's about moving forward with it. It's about evolving, understanding. And for me now, what I do is, when things hit me, I let them hit me in my body. I see where they hit me, and I sit with it, and I understand how it makes me feel. I understand what it does to me. And then I move forward with it. As I was saying, I move forward with it. I grow with it. I evolve with it. That's the only way we're going to learn. That's the only way we're going to be able to move forward wholly and as one, as a community, is to be able to really understand and support each other and move forward together.
Yeah, everything you were saying, I could so relate to. I mean, I felt like I was in a relationship with my abuser. So I was abused, between the age of 5 and 15 by two family members. One was an uncle, one was my stepfather, wasn't my biological father. And, going through that relationship. And I have people always go, you weren't in a relationship with him. What's wrong with you? Why are you even calling it that? Like, kind of being reprimanded but it's like, well, he wasn't always bad. He was my dad. He was my father. I viewed him as such. It changed. And I did feel like the other woman in my own house, because he was married to my mom. And I felt like he was cheating on her with me. Like, that's what people don't understand when you really peel back all the layers and you really work through your trauma. Because you talked about therapy, you talked about mental health, you talked, suicide. I wanted to do all those things, kill myself, because I thought I was carrying his child.
Yeah.
I was not going to bear a child for this man that hurt me when I knew my mom was trying to have a child with him. I mean, that was tough stuff to go through.
Yeah.
And as sick as that sounds, I remember having jealousy tendencies. And then I carried that jealousy tendency with me with every relationship that I embarked on. Everybody that I was with, you better not cheat on me. You better not lie to me. I became kind of, I don't want to say violent, but like had that jealousy, mantra, like, you don't do bad to me. You don't do wrong to me, because of what was being done to me. I was acting those behaviors, being manipulative, all of those things I learned from what was happening to me at home. So I completely felt a lot of what you said, through my own story as a survivor.
Yeah. We all have a story. We all have trauma. We all, sexual abuse, domestic violence, emotional abuse. It's all the same. It's all about how we deal with our trauma, how we move forward with it. So it has been a journey, but what I say is, yes, I've been through what I've been through, and it was tough and it was hard and it broke me. But from that, so many amazing things are now coming.
Mm-hmm.
People always say, do I regret what I do? Of course I regret what I did. Sorry. Of course I regret what I did. I did a lot of bad things. I hurt a lot of people. I wasn't a very nice guy, but I wouldn't change a thing, because everything I went through as an 8-year-old and up until today has made me who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And today I know who I am. I'm sure of myself. I understand life. I understand me. I understand relationships. And
it's a lifelong journey. Like, we never stop going through our healing process. I know Neil and I talked about that extensively. I'm 52 years old, and I'm still learning how to even be in a relationship, in a healthy, loving relationship, and know that I'm worth it, that I am worthy of love, and I'm worthy of receiving love. And I know myself better now than I did 10, 15 years ago. And I'm so proud of the person that I've become, because if I haven't grown through that,
I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah.
You know,
And
doing this podcast, writing the book, meeting other survivors such as you and Neil. I mean, this is amazing. This is what community is all about.
It is. And I think this is the problem with society today, is that, yes, we've done the work. We understand who we are and what we're going through, and or we understand our past and where we are today, and we're open for love. We're ready for it. But I think the problem with society today is that we all live in our little bubble. We've all got our perfect job, our perfect girlfriend, our perfect car, our perfect house. But if we actually do the work on ourselves, we're going to realize that our life really isn't that perfect. If we burst that bubble, we're going to realize that our life isn't that great, that we don't have the perfect girlfriend, we don't have the perfect house, the perfect car, that we live this Instagram kind of life. And I think people don't want to do the work because they're going to realize that, shit, my life isn't real.
I want to jump in. Candace, first of all, I can't thank you enough for season 3. We are sharing this with a wider audience. We're hoping that people will benefit from hearing these stories, will be inspired by these stories. I know it's, it's so much more than that, but if the only person that benefits from this is me, I'll take it. With our last guest, with Kenneth, I mean, some of the books that he wrote, the comic books, look back in the archives, look back for that episode. He talks about imposter syndrome. He talks about working too hard. He relates the challenges that we face as survivors to comic book heroes, to the Flash, to Batman, that type of thing. Nathan, I'm looking to you for some help, for some advice, because I can relate to a lot of what your story is about. Some of it I can't identify with at all, just speaking frankly, right, up to a certain point. But the experience of being abused at a young age, in my case 7, your case 8, having some kind of relationship or interaction with our abuser for years afterward. I have very vague memories, very not vague, but gray, uncertain memories of this time period. I know that for several years afterward, I think for summers, 2 or 3 years afterward, I engaged in sexual activity with my neighbor, and it was we were in the woods outside of our house. I think we may have been in his basement at one point, and for years I assumed that it was my idea, that I had initiated it, that I'd asked for it, that I was one that was approaching him, and that's probably the hardest part of my story to get over. I'm not even so, not going to say not upset. The initial abuse was so, in that sense, innocuous, because I didn't know what was happening to me, right? We could have been playing Matchbox cars. I didn't know what was going on, but it's the stuff that happened afterwards that really has stayed with me and made me question, the guilt that I carry from that. And so I want to get back to something that you said, and I want to ask, is this the key? You said you were able to forgive your attacker, your rapist. Is that the key?
That's a.
I'm asking for a friend. I mean,
all right, tell your friend. Yeah, it's a big part of it.
Me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big part of it, because for me, if I didn't forgive or go to some way to forgive this man, I would still have so much anger and hatred inside of me, and I don't have that anymore. I'm able to move forward and be at peace with what happened to me. Mind you, my attack is dead, and he died before I came out about what happened to me. So I never got a chance to speak with him, or I would love to, if I had the opportunity, I would love to sit with him, speak with him, ask him why, ask it if it happened to him, forgive him, but then also, and I've always said this, I'd take a baseball bat and I'd kill him. Not because of what he did to me, just so he couldn't do it to another kid. Whether that's right or wrong. But in order to forgive, in order to move forward, forgiveness was a massive part of it. Also, I wrote him a letter. And that's a big part of it. Write a letter to your abuser, telling him how you feel, telling him that he doesn't own you anymore, telling him that he doesn't have the power over you anymore, and do what you want with it. Take the letter to your grave, give it to a loved one, burn it, which is what I did. Keep it on you forever so you can see how far you've come. And then, yeah, do what you want with it. And in writing that letter, I was finally able to get my closure as well. So for me, it was about, I guess there's three main things. Understanding that it wasn't my fault, because I lived my life. It was my fault. I don't deserve love. I don't deserve happiness. I don't deserve anything good in my life, because that's what I was told. That's what was ingrained in me. So understanding that it wasn't my fault, being able to find forgiveness for him, but most importantly for yourself. Forgiving yourself for what you've done and for what was done to you. And when you're able to forgive yourself, again, that weight comes off. You're able to understand who you are. You're able to understand your relationship with this man. And three was write that letter. That were the main three components. Obviously, there's a lot more work in understanding, in learning about shame, learning about toxic masculinity, learning about, Stockholm syndrome. So there's a lot more to it, but the three main ones were forgiveness, were writing this letter, and understanding that it wasn't my fault. Because once you do that, you let go of anger and hatred. You let go of self-sabotage and imposter syndrome. There are so many components there that you it's like an onion. You're shedding all these layers off you. So yeah, forgiveness was a big part of it. Absolutely.
Candace, I'm going to ask you the same question. You kind of asked it to me earlier in a sense, but hearing Nathan talk about, forgiveness and, writing that letter, where are you on that journey? I mean, I'm looking to both of you. I feel like I'm, with this whole season and with this whole process, I'm surrounded by people who are further along on the journey of healing. Where are you in that on that process? What was forgiveness like for you?
So I am fortunate enough. So my abuser is still living. I carry this man's last name. So my last name is his last name. When I had I owned a house in Racine, and he did a lot of yard work. He taught me yard work. I'm anal about my yard work because that's what he taught me. And that was a skill he had. And I always appreciate, I know how to take care of my yard because of this man. That was the pro, right? I remember he used to cut my grass. I looked at it as free labor. My grass is going to look flawless because he owes me, and I would never talk to him. He would be outside. My kids were inside, kind of, using him the way I felt he used me. That was my mentality in the 90s. Okay. And then one day my girls weren't there and I was home by myself, and he tapped on my back door and I was scared. I reverted back to that little girl, and he asked me if he could come in. And I was like, okay, because I was brought up respect. I was brought up, still had that mentality where he was still my father. I was always searching for my biological father, hadn't found him yet. But Fred was my stepfather. So I let him in, and I remember him walking into the back door, and I proceeded to walk backwards towards the front door. So he sat on my couch. I stood by the front door so that if I needed to get out, I could, because he wasn't going to hurt me. I knew that. And he sat down, And he said he was sorry. He said, I'm sorry, Candy. I'm sorry for what I did to you.
Wow.
And I got my apology. And I took that and I forgave him. Now, I'll never forget. You never forget, right?
Okay.
But I forgave him. And it was at that moment that I knew I felt better already, right? But I still had a long way to go. I had a long way to go. And that was just something. Now, he's never admitted this to my mother. He's never told my mom that he did anything wrong. And that was fine. She knows. She believed me. And when I told her, finally disclosed to her, which I don't even remember how I did it, when I did it, I just remember Randy, the father of my kids, said, if you don't tell her right now, I'm coming over there and I'm telling her. And I told her, and she was like the shock factor, and he was out the next day. So, this whole journey of forgiveness is very hard. And you go through different processes when you go through it. So my step was just having that conversation. I got what I needed, and he said it, and I forgave him. So and I'll say this as well. I have declared this, and people call me crazy, but if Fred were to die tomorrow and he had no service, no funeral services, or no arrangements could be made, I would still step up and do what I need to do and close that chapter of my life, because I am so empowered with what I'm doing. I know I spoke my truth. This man is never going to define who I've meant to be. Look at what I'm doing. Look at the change that I'm making. My story is a true testimony that you take your test, you turn to your testimony, you take your mess, you turn to your message. And that's where I am in my forgiveness journey. And I'm shining the light, and I feel so much better. Even to my mother, she carries, I think, a lot of blame. My mom, I feel bad for her sometimes because the work that I do is very hard for her to handle. But I even told her I forgave her. She didn't even ask for my forgiveness. But I told Mom, I don't blame you. I love you. I forgive you, because I don't want her to take this to her grave. She didn't hurt me. He did. So
I want to repeat what you just said, Candace. I hadn't heard that phrase before. You take your test and make a testimony. You take your mess,
and turn
make
it
it
into
your
your
message.
message.
I love that. Yeah.
I mean, I was tested. I mean, I could have taken my life and I wouldn't be here. I could have died. I would have never had my kids, my grandkids. I wouldn't have my family. I think about those things, but and so I also have my faith. I was really grounded in faith, just having faith. And I know it's a whole nother podcast, but just knowing that I had a foundation, that there was purpose in my life. And I'm glad that I had that faith in that foundation.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that you're not as far along in your processes as what Candace and I are, and that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. There's no rush. We're all on our own journey. We're all on our own, journey of understanding what we went through, and as long as you're able to talk about it, get it out, I think that's the most important thing. That's the first step. You're here, and that's the most important thing. You're able to talk about it. And yes, your journey is just beginning, but it's only going to get easier. It's only going to get better. It's only going to get lighter. You're going to be able to understand it a lot more. And, one day, God willing, one day you'll be able to forgive yourself. You'll be able to, go to a certain extent in forgiving this person who abused you. Because I have a lot of people reaching out to me on Instagram who know my story or have read my book or whatever it is. And they're all asking me for advice. What do I do now? How do I do this? And what do I do? And, my answer for all these people is that I'm not a therapist. I can't give you advice. You need to go on your own journey. Take what you want from my story, take what you want from my journey, but you need to go on your own, at your own pace. And, when I say that to these people, they get it, they understand it, because they're in such a hurry because they see where I'm at and they're down here. And I'm like, that's okay. There's no rush to it. Just go on the journey you need to go on. And, hopefully you're able to get through it. Hopefully you're able to push forward through it and understand and find forgiveness, find love, and, live a life you were supposed to live. Yes, we are no longer victims. We're survivors. We're thriving. We're powerful. We are strong. We've got a voice. We're I think we're stronger than most people in the world. after what we've been through and what we've lived through, where we can handle pretty much anything. So I say, you know what, whether you are at the same, you know, level as Candace and I, but you are, because you're out there, you're talking about it, you're thriving, you're a survivor.
Neil, the fact that you're here doing this,
Exactly.
you know, you're showing up and you are learning with this experience, and this is going to just keep putting, like, empower you to do something extravagant with whatever your next step is in your journey. And what I love about this is it's just the power of the connection, right?
Yeah.
And I always say divine design. Our paths were meant to cross, all of our paths, and nothing can break that. You know, together we are louder than our silence. And there's going to be a lot of people that take their stories to the grave. There's going to be a lot of people that stay in silence, and that's okay too. Just know that we are their voice. We're the ones speaking up for them, even though they don't want to speak up for themselves. You know, but with every time we do disclose and we share our story, it probably takes one more person to listen and say, well, if they did it, I can do it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, one by one, you know, one by one.
It is getting easier. It is getting easier. I mean, I've shared my story maybe 2 or 3 times. With, you know, the first episode of this series, this season, you know, I was the guest. I wasn't the co-host. But what I'll tell you, Nathan, is from, you mentioned the TED Talk that you gave last fall. What really blew my mind was, you know, the data, the stats in terms of all the TED Talks, the number of TED Talks that were about male survivors.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my coach told me. He said there's been about 110 TED Talks on sexual abuse. Before me, there were 2 other TED Talks about male sexual abuse. 2 others out of 110. One was from a female, speaking about this from a female's perspective. The other one was from a guy up in Canada. I think it was 2017. So it was, you know, a good 5 years ago. I haven't seen it, or I don't know what it was about, but he got up, spoke about male sexual abuse, and then he's just kind of disappeared, and we've never heard from him since. So, you know, it goes to show just how taboo it still is, and how no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to know about it. So the fact that I was given that opportunity, I never thought I would. When I did it, here's another stat for you. So you can apply for as many TED Talks as you want. And we applied for 84 TED Talks. And I got into TED Talk DeSoto, which is in Dallas. DeSoto was the 84th one that I applied to. It was the very last. That was meant to be. And all the other TED Talks that I applied to, I just kept getting back rejections. Sorry, we don't want to talk about that, or it's not in line with our theme, whatever it was. And I just kept saying to my coach, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Like, what do we have to do to be able to talk about male sexual abuse or child sexual abuse? No one wants to know about it. No one wants to talk about it. But finally, DeSoto did, and God bless them, I love them. And that's now finally opened the door, and a lot more things are coming as a result, a lot more speaking events, a lot more, you know, opportunities. A movie's been written, possibly a TV show. So, you know, I'm excited for what's to come and where I am. And like I said in the beginning, this is a journey I never wanted to take, wanted to be on, but it was meant to be. I'm here. And like you said, it's an everyday journey. You learn every day from it. You grow every day from it. I wouldn't want to be on any other journey now. It's pretty powerful. What we are doing is pretty powerful. And, you know, we're going to change the world. We're going to save thousands and thousands of lives. And That's pretty fucking powerful.
It's oh my God. So let's just do a mic drop on that.
I was told I kept saying we've got one life. You just got to live this one life.
Yes.
Someone told me recently, you live every single day, but you die once.
Yes.
You have to live every single day.
Yes.
And that's what I'm trying to do now, is just live every single day for myself, to make myself happy, to give myself joy and peace, but also for others, for those who are voiceless, for those who don't have a chance to talk about it, for those who will never be able to find peace and get closure. I want to be their voice. I want to live for them and say, listen, you can do this. You can get through this. It's fucking hard. It is hard work, and it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of years, but
the reward is so amazing. You can save one life, then you've done your job as an advocate, as a survivor, as a thriver. And let's plug your book, Toy Cars. Let's plug your memoir. For those of you watching and listening, please make sure you purchase on Amazon. I know it's available. It's in pretty much all the major bookstores, so that's great. And then also, take a look at my book, Unspoken. The title itself, Unspoken, because I wasn't supposed to tell. I was supposed to keep that a secret forever. And that's why it's called the one word, Unspoken.
Yeah.
And that's also available on Amazon. And, I'm just so grateful that you are here, Nathan, to share your story. And just one thing I just want to say is, what are you most grateful for as we begin to wrap up this episode? What are you most grateful for?
I don't know if this is corny, but I'm grateful for life. I'm just grateful for life, for where I am today. I'm grateful for the journey. It's been a roller coaster ride. It's been ups and downs, and it's been a hell of a life. But today, what I'm grateful for is I'm grateful for life, because I've got a pretty goddamn good life. And I might not have all the money in the world, but I'm richer than most people in the world because I know who I am. I know what I want, and I know where I am in life. And that's so much richer and more powerful than all the money in the world, because you can have all the money in the world, but you are still miserable. Mm-hmm. You are still unhappy. You are still lost. So yeah, I'm grateful for life. Obviously, I'm grateful for my family and my friends who have supported me and been there for me on this journey. There's plenty of things to be grateful for, but as hard as life is, and as much as shit's going on in the world with COVID and then the war in Ukraine and this, that, and the other, life is a beautiful thing. It's what we make of it. It's how we want it, how we choose to live it. So yeah, that's what I'm grateful for.
Thank you, Nathan. That's wonderful. And I just want to put a plug in. I know I had mentioned to you briefly that, I've aligned myself, not only, with my book, Unspoken, my podcast, Unspoken Conversation with Candace, but I've aligned myself with the National Foundation of Ending Child Abuse and Neglect. They're called ncan.org. So I want to plug them. They are hosting walks to bring awareness to this topic of child abuse and neglect and to end it. We know what the stats are. We want to change the narrative. We don't want to sweep this under the rug. What I love about the Walk Together, it is about community. It's to uplift and inspire others and shine a positive light on the community. When you come together and you talk about these topics, these taboo topics, you're educating, your prevention. It's all about prevention and putting the word out. So I just wanted to make sure that I did a plug for the Walk Together. They are in, cities, and they're trying to expand. But definitely here in the city of Milwaukee, I was privileged enough humbled and honored to host a walk here in Milwaukee. So I partnered with this national organization. So please check them out. Donate if you'd like. That'd be great. Wanted to make sure I put a plug. So as we wrap up,
the walks.
Oops,
sorry, Candace. These were the walks that took place last year.
Right.
This year, just expanding that is so great, and getting more support for that.
Yes. So stay tuned, stay connected. But yeah, so I just wanted to thank you, Nathan, for being a guest today. on Unspoken Conversation with Candace, season 3, which is dedicated to all male survivors. And so you become part of my marketing team. You get to help us market this and
Absolutely.
spread this out. And we will make sure that we put your TED Talk and all the links to your all the resources, even all the groups that you're a part of. We're going to make sure that we document all of those so that there are resources. So whoever's watching, listening, can actually go to those resources if they're in any of the areas that we are, city states that we are living in. So thank you again for being here on the show.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and for doing what you are doing, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Nathan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.